Hello, welcome to the mountains. We have chosen this backdrop to introduce our series on the majesty of church finance. While majesty in finance, or lofty in finance, or even beautiful and finance are not words we often put together, there is majesty in our stewardship of God's gifts. In this session, there are three main objectives. First, you'll listen to the experience of a church treasurer in order to learn about the role and responsibility of a treasurer. And finally, you'll follow up your learning with discussion questions.
Welcome to our first session on faith and finance in the local church. Over the next 10 sessions, we will introduce you to concepts of local church finance that are universal. Have you ever wondered why our local churches, or how our local churches continue to maintain their unique culture while all the time remaining connected to our United Methodist denominational structure? It is because each local church, especially those of us in small to medium-sized churches, rely on volunteers who work behind the scenes to make sure we can financially continue in our ministries. Serving as a financial officer or in a financially related position within a local church requires that we serve with fiduciary responsibility over the financial matters of the church. This fiduciary responsibility means that we stand in service to perform our duties with the trust and confidence that we act for the benefit of the church and not for the benefit or convenience of ourselves. As we serve with these responsibilities in local churches, we are guided to provide the most effective and most efficient ways to safeguard the assets entrusted to our care. One of the ways we safeguard the assets is to put procedures in place that have been proven to minimize risk by preventing and detecting error, deterring fraud, and protecting staff and volunteers.
First, let's answer the question, what does it mean to be a church treasurer? At its most basic, a treasurer fills a volunteer position in a church to help congregations manage the necessary finances to carry out their mission and ministry. However, the dynamics of finance in a local church are not just laid at the door of the treasurer. First, the finance committee is voted on for each year at the charge conference. The members of the finance team are the treasurer, finance secretary, the pastor, and other members of the church as stated in the Book of Discipline. The treasurer has the critical role of maintaining the business integrity, both financial and legal, of the local church. The treasurer should stay up to date on local, state, and federal laws regarding legal issues that are addressed by the church. Commitment by the treasurer is one of the most important ways to lead a successful church. Generally, the church treasurer position is a volunteer or non-paid staff position. However, even though he or she is uncompensated, the role of the treasurer is vitally important to the efficient operation of the church. The treasurer works under the supervision of the pastor and functions outside the normal staff structure, yet is vitally linked to the sound business plan of the local body. Let's meet Church Treasurer Garry Smith.
I've been a Colorado native my whole life, 52 years. I come from a family of 6. Mom and dad have been married for 58 years. They got married when they were 16 and 17 years old. And I am the third child out of 4, and I've got three sisters. For work, I came up in the family business, working very closely with my entire family for my dad. And then I ventured out after that into the insurance industry, and I've been taking care of injured workers through the work comp system and various liability claims. All of this has given me really a good, solid financial background, which has been very beneficial with my role as treasurer here in the church. I've got a husband of 5 years. His name is George Taylor, and we've been together 24, but married 5. And we're proud dog parents to 3 dogs, 2 Doberman, and a Basset Hound. We make quite the little family ourselves, and we just enjoy, everything like any other normal brick and mortar family would enjoy. So that includes, our time with the church community, our time at home, enjoy reading, playing piano, and all things sports. You know, I really think of myself as a glorified bookkeeper, honestly. As we'll talk a little bit more getting into this, the responsibility of the finance team and the financial doings of the church don't certainly rest at the foot of the treasurer's door. We've got a finance team that works with me in conjunction with the other arms of the church, whether that be the SPRC, our admin council, and along with me on the finance team, I've also got a co-team lead. We've recently branded ourselves as team leads as opposed to chairperson, etc. So I've got a co-team lead with me that I work with, and that individual is more responsible for the reporting, the reports out to admin council, to the conference, et cetera, et cetera. And then I, as the treasurer, handle more of the day-to-day in the bills. Between us on the finance team, we make sure that we are up to date on all, state laws applicable to churches and nonprofits. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in terms of making sure that our tax identification numbers are up to date, that our nonprofit licenses are up to date, and then just general reporting for W-2s and income and the folks that are paid through the church and the necessary filings that go along with that. The pastor will give direction in terms of what direction the church is trying to go, and the mission and the beliefs, and make sure that we're carrying out to the best of our ability the way that the congregation would want us to be stewards of that money. So yeah, I do work very, very closely with the pastor.
Let's review what we just learned. The church treasurer is a volunteer or non-paid staff position who works under the supervision of the pastor but outside the normal staff structure, and whose responsibilities include monitoring the complex legal issues that affect the clergy and church-related employees.
We have the offerings that come in from the church, and a small amount of building use and other ways that we generate the church income, mostly from offerings. That is taken in and responsible for logging those deposits and keeping track of giving and all of that kinds of necessary bookkeeping work. And so then once the money is coming in and being accounted for in that way, in all the various ways that that we keep track of the giving and the building use and income, then it's incumbent upon the treasurer to make sure that the bills are paid then with that money. And we operate off of a budget, which is just basically a very loose roadmap of what we're trying to accomplish during the year. But stepping back a step, if I may, we use the funds that have come in as income then to pay the bills, whether that be the utilities, the payroll for paid staff. And it's important to note that the treasurer doesn't make the decisions as far as how that money is being spent. We are just responsible to make sure that the bills are paid, if that makes sense. Wanted to clarify that point.
Sure.
So we take that direction from the other committees within the church and then carry that out.
An effective treasurer will recognize the responsibilities placed on him or her by the leadership of the church, and will work within the leadership of the church structure to assure that the financial and business matters of the church are properly in order, but, as with any volunteer ministry in the church, doesn't need to perform those tasks alone. The treasurer is just one person whose clear-cut responsibilities for finances in the church include working closely with the financial secretary, knowing the operating expenses, distributing funds to pay those bills, and maintaining the federal employee identification number. It's important to note that the treasurer is not the person who decides how to allocate funds, but works on a budget as guided by the Administrative Council. There will be more on record keeping and transparency in an upcoming session.
We have to be cognizant and try to keep track if we're keeping up with our budget so that we can report out to the church on the financial health of the church. So the budget is used to have a guess of what we believe based on past experience is going to come in for the year, and then make sure that that is keeping pace with things like things that are more known, such as payroll, the utilities. We know all these things are going to come throughout the course of the year. The insurance payments that need to be made to insure our church. These are all things that are known, and then there are also, then we keep funds set aside to be able to take care of kind of the all other things that would come, fall into a catch-all throughout the year for the church. Again, it's not as formal and technical as folks might think. It really is more of just the big picture and the roadmap of where we want to go for that year with the church to hopefully accomplish our goals. Missions that we want to support, groups that we want to support, whether inside or outside the church. Internal, we've done, things like book studies, the winter solstice event, other things that, the summer mission trips throughout the year. Things that happen like that throughout the year. And so it's just not just the day-to-day operations of the church, but then also being able to support those other missions.
Before we continue to hear from Garry, allow me to go over a few key pieces of financial terminology with which you may or may not be familiar. A chart of accounts is simply an index or list of all of the financial accounts of an organization or institution, while a fiscal year is the 12-month period designated by that institution for tax or accounting purposes. In most cases, an organization will use fiscal years that either run from January to December or from July through June. A treasurer will help keep the budget and the administrative council on track within that fiscal year. Commonly confused are designated funds and endowments. Designated funds are monies which someone gives to the church that can only be used for a particular line item or project. On the other hand, endowments are funds that are given as a generous gift or bequest and are placed into an investment account. The church may then use the interest from that account for operating expenses or for a designated project as requested by the donor. These kinds of donations are always appreciated, and there are tax benefits for those who do give to the church. Discretionary funds, also sometimes called pastor's funds, are small amounts of money, usually $200 or $300, for which there need not be any vote to spend. For instance, a parishioner may have lost their job, and they speak with the pastor. The pastor can give the parishioner money from the pastor's fund without anyone other than the treasurer knowing. The treasurer is then held to a measure of confidentiality as an important part of that ministry. Discretionary funds can also be used to purchase something small, which is not a budgeted item. For instance, if a church has a book study with books that are rather pricey, part of the book purchase price can be subsidized by the discretionary fund. Our terminology refresher is almost complete. Planned giving, or giving from an estate, is always welcome. Occasionally, the pastor or even the treasurer may remind people that part of their legacy may come in the form of financial contributions of their trusts or wills. Many people feel extremely grateful for the church communities that have led them through the ups and downs of their lives. They may feel called to express that gratitude in financial gifts to their faith communities upon their death. The treasurer is key in helping guide this process both organizationally for the church and as a ministry to the person engaging in such planning.
The chart of accounts is really the structure of how the accounting for the church is put together, and it's broken out in buckets, if you will, all the way through from A to Z, starting with the income and the various ways that the income comes in so that can all be accounted for, and then breaking out all the different necessary buckets that would be paid and the way that payments are coded. And this is all what makes up and goes into the chart of accounts. Now, sometimes we get into a situation where a donor would like to have funds set aside for a specific purpose. And so that's where we will get into designated funds that someone has made their wishes known that they would, in fact, just as an example, we had an anonymous donor that gave us a chunk of money that they wanted to see support our vision into the future as we do services more remotely. Certainly the COVID pandemic has opened our eyes to the need to be able to be flexible in that manner, but then also to be able to serve the folks that can't be here in person. So somebody has donated a chunk of funds specifically for that. So those monies will be designated, dedicated for that purpose, and the expenditures that would go out with that. And so the endowment fund is managed by the conference, and then it's an interest-bearing fund, but there are specific purposes and bylaws and guidelines for how those monies are to be spent. So we have to be very particular that we spend and care for that money in the way that it was purposed.
Thank you, Garry, for sharing your time and your gifts of finance with us.
And thank you for being part of this first session on finance in the church. We invite you to deepen your learning by using the following questions for individual or group reflection.